Not all superheroes wears capes. Some wear wellies. Wellies.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the James Conway Experience. We have a fantastic character here with us today, and his son, a man who has written between 5 and 8 books, I'd imagine, at this stage, with really an awful lot to do with the judicial system in Ireland. And he has an analogy that I'll get him to repeat, which is the best analogy of the justice system I've heard in Ireland. Steve, Integrity Ireland, you're very, very welcome, and thank you for travelling to Sligo to be with us today.
Well, thanks, James.
I'm very, very happy that you're here.
Good man.
Darren had told me you were coming, and I'm a devil for faces, and when I seen your face, I went, yes. This will be a good conversation, so it will. So,
but when I say it's our pleasure to be here, I mean it literally, because that drive up was
beautiful,
spectacular.
Yeah,
and I'm very surprised to say, because I used to do a few Land Rover tours around the country, I didn't even know this little section of the country existed. You know, because it would be perfect for.
We're trying our best to keep it that way, Stephen. So we're very comfortable with our kind of rural isolation at the moment.
I was going to say a great place for a standoff or a shootout.
Yes,
yeah.
and
anyway, let's hope it doesn't come to that.
There was a few ad here.
Yeah, and Danny is with us, so welcome, Danny, as well. How are you? That's good. Good lad.
My bodyguard, and he put a suit on specially for you, James.
I've seen that, and I'm very, very thankful. Thank you very much.
But also, out of respect, I didn't wear a tie.
Good. You're on rural living today.
That's right.
You're on rural living today. Where did the journey start for you, Stephen?
Well, most people would know about me, the ones that know about me from the pro-justice context, right? Because there's more to the story than that, although I didn't realize at the time that the two are co-joined. But we got into difficulties, and I'll just do the short version of this because most people know the longer version of the story. But I was a soccer referee on Achill Island. Mm-hmm. We'd moved there in 2006, having returned from Japan with my 3 little children. Idyllic situation, you know, mountains, beaches. We even had a pet goat.
Yes.
The kids would walk down the road on a lead and all that sort of stuff, you know. Rural setting, oldie Irishy, diddly-dee stuff, you know. It was, romantic notions I had. I thought, this is perfect, you know. Like your man said in Braveheart, this is my island.
Yes.
I went up in the mountain and said it on camera, you know. But anyway, so I was a soccer referee, and I had occasion to caution the manager of Achill Rovers team at the time. It was only boys playing, under 12s, something like that. But he was cursing and shouting at the kids, all aggressive, telling them to get stuck in, hack down the other team, that sort of stuff. So I had to caution him a couple of times on the sideline, and did so, I thought, quite diplomatically. And of course, his response was, who the F do you think you effing well are to tell me what I can and can't say on my effing pitch? Or worse to that effect. But the problem was I'd embarrassed him. Now, what nobody knew, and I didn't even find out for about 1.5 years, purely by happenstance, when Enda Kenny's mother passed away. And a red flag went off in my head because I saw her original surname. But it turns out that this man was a second cousin to Enda Kenny, who had been imported from Scotland, from Glasgow, at about the age of 45, when he had lost his job as a primary school teacher under a cloud. That's all we could find out, because the records were sealed by the time I went looking for them. But his license to teach was taken away from him, so he was officially a primary school teacher. He'd gone through, teacher training college. That had been his job for 20-odd years.
Okay.
And then he gets secreted away to a cottage right on the far end of Achill, in a place called Dua. And there was a cottage owned by Enda Kenny's best friend. And I mean, this is off the internet. She was described. She's passed away since, Lourdes. She's passed away. She was his best friend. Her sister owned the cottage. So he ends up renting this little cottage out in the boondocks of Achill, mysteriously disappeared from public life in Scotland, and opened up a sweet shop across from secondary school. Now, this all seems a bit caricaturish, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm not going to say definitively one way or the other, because we don't know. I tend to try and stay the right side of speculation. But there's a lot of dots adding up here that made sense to me eventually, He was always a bit awkward and uncomfortable, around the kids and all the rest of it, but something was seriously amiss there. Anyway, the point was, within a month of having sort of embarrassed him on the sideline, I happened to go over to him, the referee's coming over, oh dear, what's going on? A letter had gone in to Mayo Youths alleging that I, at one of these matches, had walked into the changing rooms at a time when the little girls were undressing. Not only did he do that, he then went into the opponent's dressing room and did it there. Right, so this is the knee-jerk reaction, it seems, of the state or the people who are engaged in agencies of the state. One of their first reactions is to go after the sexual allegation. They
Yes.
throw it out there, no smoke without fire. And of course, what was supposed to happen, I was supposed to get suspended pending an inquiry by the referees. And meanwhile, the word would have gotten out and our lives would have been made hell. And the best thing we could have done would have been to up sticks and go.
Yes.
But that's when I discovered that I was amongst the most stubborn people that I've ever met. I didn't know it until this happened to us, because effectively they were coming after my reputation as a father and a husband. Luckily for us, the opposing coach in Ballina stepped up to the plate and basically made herself available. Eventually we had to go to court over it and everything. Made herself available and said, no, this never happened. And I told the manager of Hackle Rovers that it never happened when he called me on the phone. So there was a premeditated decision to try and set me up with this false accusation. As a matter of fact, the letter they wrote had 20 lines of text in it, and there were 21 lies in it. And luckily for me, the Referees Association immediately did a brief inquiry, went, no, nothing to be seen here, this is nonsense. And then, of course, I had to hire. I asked them first to write a letter of apology. They refused to do it. The committee members, about 12 of them, it might have been less, but around 12 of them, had all tentatively supported the writing of the letter, but they didn't. This was all done behind their backs. And the man that we're talking about, and I won't name him right now because he's probably quite old by now. I'd say he must be in his late 70s, if he's still with us. And it's no big secret. Anybody go and check my story out. They'll know who we're talking about. But it kicked off. All I did was I asked them just apologize. Give me a document that I can actually hold up. If anybody accuses me of this, I can say, well, here's a rejection letter from the team saying it didn't happen or whatever. That's all. But instead they dug in, and this guy had, what do they call it? Indemnified the club against any losses, provided they backed him up. So right from the very beginning, deception, lies, collusion, yeah. And as I said, I was to discover that I was one of the most stubborn people I'd ever met. I didn't know I had it in me. As a matter of fact, somewhat ironically, at the time, I was considering an application to join the Garda Reserve to be a good member of the community. That's the level of confidence I had in the system, and the way things work, as most people would. If you're just brought up in the system and you're a reasonably decent, honourable person, you'd have no real reason to question, the integrity or the ethical standards of the so-called authorities. One assumes they're all trained properly and they're picked on merit. And of course, we found out that's not quite true.
No, and I'll be truthful about it. From my experience, and herself has said it to me, she says, you don't get involved in, these kind of local things. And we'd be asked a lot, if someone's doing a committee or that would seem to be a good speaker and that. And I've said, no, to be honest, I have the perception that the vast majority of these institutions are rotten to the core, and I don't want to be involved in any capacity. I know a very, very good local businessman to here who joined the community council, and it took him approximately 2 to 3 weeks to look at the books, at which point he just says, no, I'll have nothing to do with this.
God bless him for being brave.
But he still knew that he couldn't highlight it.
Yeah.
He just knew this is what's gone on.
Yes.
And I've spoken to him multiple times and I've said, could you not have highlighted? And he says, no, because he says, and this is the bit I think that we underestimate, is that a lot of people know what's going on.
Yes.
A lot of people know that a grant was got and the project never happened, but presumably the grant money went somewhere.
Yes.
And they don't ask questions.
Yeah. Now, this, funny enough, James, like as we go through the talk today, however it unfolds, ultimately, all of the wrongs in the world, and all of the corruption, and all of the greed, and all of the violence, and everything, it all boils down to individuals
Turning a blind eye.
making amoral decisions or failing to make the moral decision. And as they said at Michel and yesterday, or the day before yesterday when we were out there, or was it 3 days? Yeah, 2 days ago. They described Enoch Burke, of all fellas, right? They said they were talking a little bit about different aspects of current current Irish society, and he was held up as and again, I'm going to forget the word again. It wasn't the moral backbone of Ireland, but it was something like that. Maybe it was the moral DNA. He's expressing the moral DNA of Ireland. And they're saying, some people don't like him. He said, well, he's not bothered if you don't like him. He's more concerned about whether or not he's doing the right thing. And unfortunately, there are two, and we might get to this while we're talking today, but there are two main overarching problems. The first is that people are not doing the right thing when the opportunity comes, like, for instance, exposing the corruption and everything. And there's a multitude of reasons for it. I'll lose my job, I'll get picked on. I'll be doing 500 days in jail if I stand up in public, and so on and so forth. All of the reasons. I'm putting the kids through college. We've got a mortgage to pay. I haven't got the luxury of being able to go up against the authorities. And what people don't realize that in that moment, because that's problem number one, people don't do the right thing when the opportunity arises, right? There's, like I said, many, many pseudo or semi-acceptable reasons for them doing this. But ultimately, you're making a moral decision, right? Even being apathetic, sure, what can I do? That is still a decision. You've decided not to support what you know to be right and to align yourself, therefore, with what is wrong. Now, the second problem that compounds the first problem is that most people actually don't know the difference between good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
When it's laid right in front of them, and including myself up for most of my life, I would have struggled to define what is good and what is evil. And they're not counterbalances, by the way. Evil is an attack on good.
Yes.
Yeah, good is all of the yin-yang stuff, most of the yin-yang stuff, but evil is an attack on the yin-yang principle of balance, you see. But people don't really get this. So you'll have all these subjective opinions, well, it's not against the law. Well, it may not be against the law, but it's amoral.
Yes.
It's wrong, It may not be against the law, but it is evil.
And there's plenty of laws that are drastically immoral. And I don't know why people can't differentiate between that. It's just because a tyrannical government has put something into law doesn't mean it's correct.
I was studying this recently, James. If Martin, I'll occasionally interrupt and just stop.
No, work away.
Yeah. Okay. I started looking at this because what you may not know, James, is that just before we started, you mentioned religion just briefly. I wouldn't describe myself as a religious person, right?
Mm-hmm.
As an overtly religious person, but I do know a lot about it. And at one time, I was training to be a minister. I even held a post in Alaska for a while as a family minister, and I was also a youth, a youth sports minister as well in a big Catholic church up there. So I've been baptized in that theology and in that environment, and then I studied world religions and I studied the psychology of religion. Now you might say, well, what's that going to? I've asked you about the law. What's that going to do?
No, yeah, I get where you're going.
Well, of course, what I found even in my professional life, when I was younger, I was working, I worked as a ski teacher, a ski instructor, and I ran ski resorts I was sort of like a troubleshooter. I was able to go in and map out a new resort or a new village in the Austrian Alps or something, work out where the bus station was, how far to the airport, where was the pizzeria and the bowling alley, and work out a plan for visitors to come there that was really cost effective and time efficient. So I had this little sort of skill developing where and this helped me when I got involved in the legal issues with the Irish state, where you can look at a problem and instead of sort of throwing yourself headfirst into the symptom of the problem and having a battle on the spot with let's say, the immigration problem or with a corrupt judge, I started trying to work out, well, how and why is this happening? How are we getting super corrupt individuals, sociopaths, immoral career liars, moral deviants, political appointees? How are these people becoming the judges of the land? Because naturally, we would expect the judges of the land should be people of the highest integrity, the highest independence, the highest levels of wisdom, and even compassion. Well, you don't get compassion in a sociopath, right? No. And that's the legal profession is way up there in the sociopathic scale. So to go back to the connection between religion and the law, I noticed while I was embroiled in all of these fights with the system or battles, with the legal system, that they seem to be able to pull a rabbit out of a hat at any particular point. And if there wasn't a rabbit in the hat, they'd cut a hole in the hat and stick one up there, when it suited them, even though that's against the law. Then they'd use things like legalese, this convoluted pseudo-Latin English language, which has all of these terms and phrases in it that are deliberately designed to confuse the ordinary layperson.
Yes.
So that you're then obliged to hire expensive lawyers, to manage a process where you're going like that, like at a demented ping pong match, what was that funny, Danny? Yeah. I'm a funny boy. I'm a funny man sometimes. Yeah I am. What is, a demented ping pong match where you're saying, what did you say? What just happened? And before you know it, it's over. You're being ushered out by the elbow by a guard or by your solicitor saying, talk in the corridor. You go out there and he goes, right, you've just gotten, a €500 fine and you have to be back here or whatever it might be. And that was how I started in the courts. And I began to think, well, there's something fundamentally wrong here now in this original concept of what's right and wrong, what's good and what's evil. There's something fundamentally wrong with a so-called justice system and with laws that are so opaque, confusing, convoluted, and eventually we found out corrupt, that they have no relationship to what we would consider to be justice, truth, decency, social control. There's no relation to that at all. It's a franchise that serves its own interests. So what's been happening is that they've been inventing laws, and when I talk about they, are we talking about the Freemasons, the Rothschilds, the Bilderberg Group? It's the cabal.
I think it's a combination of
absolutely,
all,
James.
So
and it'll be hard enough to try and establish solid links and a solid pyramid of control. But there is an entity or a concept in control, and it is the concept of evil. Right?
Yes.
And we'll get to that as we're talking, I hope. But to go back to the law, the connection between law and the religion. So I went, okay, well, where did laws all come from? And you'll get our advocates here in Ireland, and I say this with the highest degree of respect for the amount of work that has been put into this over the years. There are some people who specialize in recent constitutional law. I'm talking about lay people, let's say like Pat Clohessy, another friend of mine, Andrew Holst. They've done great work for people in the courts, and they've discovered documents are missing. The 1924 Commencement Act in the courts, which means the courts are completely unlawful. They're actually in violation of their own principles.
Yes.
They shouldn't. What they should have done, of course, they haven't done it, and they won't do it. What they should have done is said, right, we've just discovered that this document is missing, which invalidates all of the things, which would have meant literally they'd have had to open all the prison doors and let anyone out.
Yes.
If they were following their own rules and concepts and laws. They would also have had to sack all the judges in the country and reappoint them under some new form of legislation in order for the courts to continue. But of course, they don't want to do that. So this is work done by Pat Clohessy. If you don't know about him, look him up online.
I'm familiar with his work. Yeah.
A dynamic and unrelenting, with a genius of sorts for the patience and energy and time and exacting sort of forensic discoveries necessary to find these documents and to find the truth of what's going on. He looks into how they operate under the crown and all that as well. But not just him, but then there's other men such as second name was Byrne, I think, Bierne. Rory, was it, or Roy? Anyway, came to my house one day. Well, we were homeless. Came to where we were living, in a van that had his name instead of a number plate on it or something like that, or, Era 1 or something. And I said, that's the best advertisement of all. And he was asserting that by researching the laws and going back to the 1919 Constitution versus the 1937, that this was actually a fact and this was reality. And I'm going to cap all this now with an observation in a minute, James. I appreciate you letting me ramble here. And then you had other people who specialize in Breton law. They go, oh, look at Breton law, look at it. Then there's other people going, right, it all goes back to the Magna Carta. And I'm listening to all this, right? Because I discovered certain laws, such as the Petty Sessions Act, where a layperson can prosecute even a judge.
Yes.
If you caught them red-handed and you can prove that they've committed a crime. Well, according to the law, you can do it. But the system's not going to let you do it, even though the law says you should, which is why we don't have the rule of law in this country. Another discussion maybe. So we go back to the connection between religion and law. And if you go back far enough, and bear in mind, we're all living in different countries, right? And you go back and you say, well, where is the very first example of law? And the answer to that is the 10 Commandments, okay? Now, most people stop there and they go, well, it's sort of 10 pretty simple, pretty broad commandments. Don't kill people, don't steal each other's wives, honor your father and your mother. But the first commandment is what most people miss. I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not have strange gods before me. And Moses came down, the Israelites, he was up there 40 days, interesting number. He comes down off the mountain and they are worshipping a golden calf because they think he's gone. And they're at a loss because he was their spiritual leader, you see. They're at a loss. And as a consequence, he smashes the tablets, in frustration. I think 3,000, is the number. 3,000 of them are put to death for idolatry.
Yes.
It's pretty serious stuff, right? And he goes back up for another 40 days and he comes down the second time, and this time they wait for him, right? But hardly anybody has asked the question, why were the 10 Commandments made? And who answered the question was Jesus, interestingly. Because while the Pharisees were trying to trick him during his mission, which interestingly, the 2,000-year anniversary is in 5 years' time, 2030, the Great Reset and all that, interesting. So they say to him, well, what about divorce? And Jesus says, no, once man and woman are put together, let no man put asunder and all that, right?
Yeah.
And they went, hold on a minute. Moses, and you're a Jew, aren't you, Jesus? And you respect Moses, don't you, and all that. Well, Moses said it was okay to divorce. Now you're saying it isn't. Which is it? Are you going up against Moses? And Jesus says in so many words, the reason Moses gave you the law, meaning the Israelites, the chosen people, remember now, they're separate. Everybody else in the world is allowed to go off and sin and do their Sodoms and Gomorrahs and their, the Philistine, whatever it is they're doing. It's like as if God has said, okay, I've got to just focus in on one group of people to start, get them sorted, make sure that they live right, eat right, marry right, act right, and then we'll try and produce a Messiah and, from there, so to speak, right? That's the notion, right? So Jesus says you were given the law, meaning the 10 Commandments, literally carved in stone, because you were too stupid to understand how things are actually supposed to be. And do you remember I mentioned briefly at the beginning, James, before we came on air, I mentioned this concept of the original principle. I won't go into it a lot now today, but this is a phrase I've coined, the original principle. The original principle refers to the way it was before the proverbial fall, or whatever that was, okay? So everything was hunky-dory, if you like. There was no evil in that world. There were betters and worses, higher and lowers, wiser and more foolish, and all that sort of stuff. But there was no evil in that world, right? Part of the introduction of evil was a separation from the divine. And if you equate that original principle with spirit, mind, body, concept, plan, and action, deity, feminine, and masculine in that order, it all makes sense, right? Trust me, science, history, the whole lot, it all fits into it. But spirit, mind, body, if you get your intuition and your motives from the spirit, or in today's world, from our brain or our higher consciousness, you might call it your spirit, your soul, if you have a conscience, certainly for me now, I'd say at this point in my life, I would not choose to do anything important without thoroughly consulting my conscience first. And it'd be from there, and in as much as my conscience may or may not be connected to the divine, that's what guides me how to plan things and then take action. So concept, plan, action, right?
Well, since everything that I've been through, I have came to basically only 2 conclusions that I try to live by. Now, one of them is kind of a conclusion of my own thinking, and the other one is something that I heard. I heard it in a film called The Kingdom of Heaven, or that, with King Baldwin. But the first one that I came up with is, for the longest time I thought, we're all humans trying to have a spiritual experience.
Very good.
Well, in actual fact, we're just spirits having a human experience.
Interesting.
And then with King Baldwin, it's the speech while they're playing chess. Now, I won't try to reflect the full speech, but the gist of it is summed up in one line, which goes, just remember, your soul is in your own keeping.
Very good.
And he's on about, life is a chessboard. You can move yourself, or maybe a hand will move you, but your soul is in your own keeping. So what you decide to do, what you decide not to do.
Yes.
And I thought, though, with those 2 concepts, if everyone kind of embraced them, they'd be better off. So, like, I look at things now, like I had a conversation with a friend, he's suffering from addiction at the minute. And I says to him, you're looking as the addiction as the problem, when in actual fact, the addiction is the solution to another problem. You've tried to solve this problem in a poor way. And when we identified, well, actually, what he was trying to do was numb his senses to thinking about this.
Yeah, stop thinking about something. Yeah.
So I says, what you actually have to do is you have to go back to that source problem, address that, and then the addiction goes away. And that's what we've done with him, and he's doing very well now. But I suppose, in my essence with it, with the courts, everything in this country at the moment, I've came to the realization it's a fallacy.
It's worse than a fallacy, James.
Yes.
It's a constructed, contrived deception being foisted on us in the guise of necessary social control.
Yes.
Well, if I could make this point, just to go back to, we were talking about the law, right? So the 10 Commandments etched in stone, right? Why? Because the people are so stupid. Why are they so stupid? Because they lost their connection with the divine at the fall, right? And so at the fall, we have Cain, then murders his brother Abel, right?
Yeah.
Abel was in the feminine position. Cain, big alpha male, right? This is the story of human history. It's all of the males dominating, using the satanic mindset, violence, oppression, greed, domination, wars. It's all about control, where the feminine is suppressed and the spirit is missing, right? And once you start to understand this, you then see the structures of the world. So first of all, the chosen people, Israelites, of course, we had the flood and all that, and then eventually you get Abraham, and he becomes the father of the Arabs and the Jews, okay? But it's from that point, that's where, subsequent to that, and we've got the 10 Commandments. They're there to establish a baseline. Look, you people are so stupid, you don't realize it's not the wrong thing to be building a golden calf and worshiping it like a god. You don't get it. Why? Because you're not connected to the divine anymore. You're rambling around in this world. Your minds are all confused. This is also an argument for the current gender confusion and all that's going on. A lot of the stuff that's going on, it's because as individuals, because organizations don't have souls.
Yes.
People do.
By definition.
Yeah. And also, organizations tend to require that you or I, if we join the organization, surrender at least some of our conscience or our integrity or, whatever it is, our standards, to the goals of the organization.
Yes.
And most of the time, the goals of organizations that are embedded in this world are not good.
No.
And this is what I'm talking about, piecing it all together. But to go back then to the 10 Commandments, you go, okay, so now we understand why we had the original 10 Commandments. They were pretty broad and pretty straightforward. I think it's the book of Deuteronomy in the Bible, then it goes on, there's hundreds of sub-laws, like being allowed to impale your slave through his earlobe to the doorpost if he steals a biscuit or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's all of these sub-laws that come out of the original 10 laws. But the original 10 Commandments refer to this original principle. That's what I'm talking about. It's the basis upon which we return to that original state of blissful harmony where we were all children of God, children of light. Who knows, James, you and I might be colonizing universes by now. Do you know what I mean? If we had all stayed connected to the divine instead of having had centuries, as I put it, centuries of poor mating choices.
Yes.
And the byproduct is people like you and me are sitting here scratching our heads. We have an inkling that there's something we're supposed to be connected to, but we don't quite know how to get there.
And now a word from our sponsors.
You're probably always wondering what these bottles are all about. I'll give you a wee heads up. Folks, what we're going to talk about now is beetroot. Now, I've based my bottles around beetroot, and the benefits of the beetroot is it boosts athletic performances, helps stroke prevention, and that's what it does, massively helps benefit the heart. It's a natural immune booster. Listen, I would love to put a health claim in the bottle and say natural immune booster. We're not allowed to, but the bottom line is, when by any 4 weeks, you're not a one bottle wonder bottle, you'll not do it overnight. So try it for 4 weeks, it'll cost you no more than about €48. What's not to like about that?
When the storm hits and the power goes out, you shouldn't be left stuck. The handcrafted Donnelly rocket stove gives you reliable cooking anywhere, anytime. Using just small bits of wood, it's efficient, eco-friendly, and built to last. Cook outdoors with confidence, whether it's for emergencies, camping, or everyday use. Order yours today at donnellystoves.com and use code CONWAYEXP for €10 off your order.
So we use methods and means like religion, mysticism, prayers, chanting, singing, going out into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, fasting and praying. These are all intermediary, necessary, and depending on the sort of person you are, methods of trying to reconnect with the divine. But like you just said earlier about your friend with addiction, right? Many of the constructs that we take for granted as being necessary in the world we live in today, and let's just use 2 simple examples. Let's use the law and religion as 2 classic examples, but you could extend it to big business, governments, lots and lots of other stuff, education systems, wherever it might be. Well, let's just use the law and religion just briefly. You ask yourself, where do these 2 things come from? And then to jump the gun, go right back to when the original principle was the state of being, when Adam and Eve walked, he's going to giggle, naked and ashamed. I told you. It's good, consistent teenage boy syndrome we have here. Isn't that right, Danny? Yeah. So they walked naked and ashamed in the garden with God. Everything was hunky-dory. Something goes wrong. That's a religious topic maybe for another day. But it was after that that religion was introduced, and it was after that that the law was introduced. In other words, they cannot possibly, by definition, be perfect.
Yes.
So any religion that claims we are the one true, only true church, or we are the only religion that is valuable or has any credit, right? Go, well, hold on, let's put a caveat on that. All that. It'd be like me today coming here, and I say to you, how do I get to your place, James? And you say, well, there's only one true way to get here. I'll say, well, that's not strictly true.
Yes.
There's several different ways I can get there, James, but just give me one that's going to achieve the result, which is what? To get to the point where I don't need a map anymore. Yes. Right? So the same thing with the law and the same thing with religions. They are temporary constructs at best in the overall history of humanity that arguably we have needed. Historically, we've needed because we're so bloody stupid. Like Jesus said, Moses let you have the law because you were too stupid. You needed some form of guidance. Yeah?
Yeah.
Normally, you'd be directly connected to source, to the deity, to God, and you would be your own authority. you wouldn't need other authorities to tell you what to do. Now, you would go to wiser figures and more experienced figures if you're going to be a carpenter, going to build a house. I'll come to you, James, because even though I'm older than you, I assume, you've got more expertise. But the interesting thing is you're not going to use the expertise to keep me in the dark.
No.
You're not going to go, right, I'm not going to share my trade secrets with this Manning guy because then I'll be out of a job. No,
but isn't that the essence of masonry and all those things, is the expertise that they had?
Protect it. Yeah, keep it secret. Yeah, because by doing so, you maintain an ungodly position of authority and power.
Yes.
And this is what it all comes back to. And again, this is where the mix between the law and... See, my mission, if you like, my vocation started with an impulse after a change in my life in my mid-30s, an impulse to do the right thing, to serve God as best I understood at the time. Because I hadn't been religious up to then, in as much as I used to grit my teeth passing the church because of the way I've been brought up. I resented it. But then something happened to me. I had a life-changing experience, which usually involves a breakdown of some sort.
Yes.
A great trauma or tragedy where you're borderline, you could go either way, you know. And a lot of people sadly do take the other way because they just, But I had the sense, I suppose, there was something deep in me, probably from my Catholic upbringing, that just said, look, Lord, this is too much for me. I can't, I can't handle this. Now, my parents told me, you're our Heavenly Father. Well, step in and do something here because, if this keeps up, I'm out of here.
Yes.
And things did start happening, not immediately, and I didn't quite understand what was happening at the time, but all of a sudden it's this business of, we have a little bottle of water here. If I take another bottle exactly the same size, right, and it's already half full, well, I can't empty this good water into a bottle that's already half full of dirty water, or it'll get all corrupted. You have to empty this one first.
Yes.
And it's that state of emptiness that most people are not comfortable with, not realizing, no, just, hold it. There's something good coming.
Yes.
Just stay with it, depressing though it may feel at the moment, lonely though it may feel, confusing though it may feel. Empty yourself. And that's what all the mystic traditions are all about. Emptying yourself to allow for the spirit to come in, And all of a sudden you start getting intuitions, then you've got to make a choice, Oh, really? It becomes clear. Moral clarity starts to arrive. So then when I got into this battle later on, many years later, after being married with children, this legal battle in Ireland, with the politicians and everything, I already had a sense of, I don't want to sound too pretentious here, but righteous motivation, if you like, or
I'm
vocation.
familiar with it.
Yeah. And that's super important. And it can easily drift over into vengeful,
yes,
nastiness too. And I know, let's say quite a few, let's say a handful at least, of pretty active pro-justice people who struggle to control their vengeful impulses. I mean, me too. At one time, you said, "What's the solution?" I'd say, "Roll out the guillotines."
Yes,
roll out the guillotines. And then bit by bit, I realized, well, hold on a minute. If that's the solution, why hasn't, someone done it already? Why hasn't? Or let's look back in history and what happened when that happened. We said, well, what they did, they rolled out the guillotines, brought in all these well-intentioned, well-meaning, sincere folks who then replicated the old system, created diabolical systems.
But when you look at it, the concept, and nobody speaks about it anymore, the concept of Sodom and Gomorrah is, it's a very strong concept. Mm-hmm. And I hear so many people, do you know Douglas Murray? He's the editor of The Spectator and all that. And there's this big clinging for Judeo-Christian Western society. And I had this conversation with John Waters, and he says, all of these people are talking about it's dying.
Yes.
And I went, it's dead. And he started laughing. Well, he says, that's the conclusion I'm coming to, which is, if you have a society that can't even replicate itself, people,
yes.
You have young couples now who are basically saying, well, we can't have children because all of this is so horrendous that why would you bring a child to it?
Yes.
Whereas someone like myself, I go from a historical, and I'm very lucky. I didn't get the whole college education thing, and I grew up in. I won't say we were impoverished, but we weren't very well off.
Yeah. We'd be the same. Yeah.
So my element is, well, you have central heating, and you have
Food
a
on the
television on the wall, and
Yeah.
the fridge is full, and okay, fair enough. There's a lot of bad things, but
who needs any more?
yes,
Yeah.
and I don't know if a society comes to a stage where all of your base requirements
Yeah.
are met,
Yeah.
and it goes, but I can't bring a kid into that. I think to myself, this is very strange territory to be fallen into.
Yeah.
Like when one looks around the great cities, London,
I know it reads me well.
Cologne, and all that,
Yeah,
you
Cologne, I know what you
yeah,
mean.
you see all these beautiful things that were manufactured, and then really and truly, since the 1940s on, it's grotesque, it's
Street lamps,
brutalism,
isn't it?
it's horrible.
Yeah, street lamps is one I saw recently.
Yes,
actually.
yeah.
A very simple example. Modern day street lamps are like straight, functional,
Yes,
soulless constructs. And then you look at the old ones from 100 years ago or so.
Yes.
and there's these ornate works of art,
yes,
and somebody's gone to some effort to make sure that this thing that you're going to see every time you come out of your front door has a certain aesthetic beauty to it,
well, even a simple
or
thing,
even interest.
color.
Oh, now you're on my subject. Here we are.
Color has been stripped away entirely. Do you know?
That was the second book that I wrote. Yeah, and it's actually that has everything to do with this original principle.
Oh, well, talk to me about this, because this is something that I've really noticed. Because even interior-wise, rural scenery.
Sure.
Now, this is a very strange thing to me, all right?
Go on, James.
Reps. Do you remember that scheme in the 90s, Darren, or that, you could paint your shed green or grey. That was it.
Oh, really?
That's it. So I can't help but feel that this is state-sponsored to some degree. Like if you have the Department of Agriculture dictating to people, well, you know how you want to paint that shed blue or pink.
Yeah.
You can't do that. No. It's either green or grey.
Mm-hmm.
So green, it blends in, grey, it doesn't stand out, all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Why has there been such an attempt, and even in the United Kingdom, if you want to paint your house a different colour, you have to get planning permission in a lot of parts of the UK for that.
Yeah. Well, it's all about control, of course. Well, one observation I'll make on this, on the positive side, as I mentioned earlier, I was a ski teacher for in and around 20 odd years. Some years I didn't do it, but in Austria, for example, now the backbone of the Austrian economy is tourism.
Yes.
Right? And early on, they realized that, the Americans and the Brits and the Irish and everything were coming over to Austria and going, ooh, look at that gingerbread house look, isn't that cute? So they brought in planning laws whereby you cannot build a new Austrian house other than with the wood shutters and in the, is it Baroque style, whatever it might be, Austrian, anyway, the Austrian, curly wood style and all that sort of stuff. Common sense thing to do. Now, if the Irish state were to say, well, the reason we issued those guidelines for planning permission was to maintain the cultural integrity, if you like, of the Irish landscape. Yeah. But unfortunately, we know that's not true because...
What if you're maintaining the integrity of a culture that's dying out? Like you could make the argument that what they've done, they attempt to maintain something that was dying.
Yes.
And they prevented a new outburst from it from taking place. Because, do you remember when you had what is it called, the New Age traveller movement in parts of Ireland?
Remember that. Yeah.
Well, they came down on that like a ton of bricks because they didn't want it and they didn't like the idea of people with dreadlocks and unique buildings and stuff like that.
Yes.
So there you had a culture that was trying to grow anew.
Itself. Yeah. Well, here's the question, James, right? The first question now, when we talk about culture, right, and most of us jump to romantic notions, diddly-dee music and the old days, the old days and all that sort of stuff, Guinness, right? Danny's having another giggle here. You never know what might set him off, so,
Good lad.
Yeah, he's a wonderful boy. But I again, I say, like I said to you earlier, zoom out. Let's look at the bigger picture here. What makes any given culture worth saving? Just because you have romantic notions about it? And again, I'm going to jump across now to let's call them the Gaza, the Hamas, right? For example. And again, we're going to stray away from making any definitive political statement, but let's just note and accept the fact that culture, however it came about and for whatever reason exists, that's a culture. But it's a culture of death. It's a culture of destruction. It's a culture of victimhood. It's a culture of, now someone could argue, let's say we're going to move Hamas and all their supporters off to the north, which I think Trump has suggested, send them over to North Africa somewhere, Djibouti or something, whatever. And they arrive in their new landmass that they're going to live in, let's say, and they go, right, we want to maintain our culture. And we go, oh dear, that's going to be a problem. We'll have to transport some Jews in here next door to you so you can keep on murdering people. Is that okay with you? So do you know what the point I'm making is look, there are good and beautiful aspects to most cultures in the world. Certainly there are interesting aspects to most cultures. And I've traveled an awful lot.
Yes. That's a very thank
Yeah, I only haven't been yet to Africa and South America. Middle America I've been to, not South America. Almost everywhere else I've been, Arctic and Antarctic as well. That's about it. But everywhere else now I've sort of been. Some places I spent time in. And I was always fascinated. Living in Japan, for example. I mean, you'd hardly get much different to the Western culture, in a responsible way, than living in somewhere like Japan, where the individual is not really important. Your role in the community as an individual is provided you're contributing to the community. But things like honesty and sincerity and all that, you would just take it for granted. You could lose your wallet and it'll still be there several hours later. You walk back or someone will have handed in,
Why is there this tendency in Japan, though, to have a kikamori, I think they're called, or that, the people who withdraw completely from society?
Oh, you may have hit on something I'm not familiar with, James. I'm sorry to say.
Oh, no, it's something I've watched a few documentaries on it lately.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems that exactly what you've just said.
Yes.
Your function is part of the community.
Yes.
And if someone comes to the mental block of the gun, well, I'm not much benefit to the local community.
Yes.
They don't actually engage at all. They just withdraw completely.
Well, you see, like all cultures, there's good and bad aspects to it.
Yes.
Now, whilst I enjoyed, I was teaching over there, colleges and universities and stuff. So whilst I would enjoy the B movie star treatment,
yes.
which was like the Japanese would see you because you're a gaijin, which means a foreigner.
Yeah.
And from their point of view, this is a very big nose.
Yes.
You'd qualify as well.
Yes.
Even though in our culture, it's relatively modest, and they'd be going, and sometimes they wouldn't really know who you are exactly, but you're a white face in the mass of, we were in a place called Okinawa, where my wife was from, little tropical island in the south. 1 second, Danny wants to say something. We're live on camera, Danny. Is that okay?
I'll say something.
You want to say something?
Yeah.
Talking to the microphone there.
Here we are, Danny. Yeah. Now, this could be anything, folks, and I hope we've got censorship abilities. Come a little bit closer there, Danny.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Hi guys. My name is Danny, and I'm here with my dad. And I born in Japan. I speak Japanese, but I do, and my mother speaks Japanese, and it's very sad because my mom's not here, and actually I'm engaged now.
Good man.
Well done. Thank you very much,
Danny.
So to summarize that, he's just letting you know that he supports his dad, and his mum sadly isn't here, and he's married now.
Good man. Well done, Danny. Good
That's
lad.
a friendly married Japanese woman who stayed with us a brief visit.
Good.
And Danny was enthralled by her.
Yes.
And her husband very generously said, well, Danny, you're like my brother now, so we'll share everything.
Yes.
Yeah? Not literally, of course. So Danny went to the ring shop.
Yes.
And he spent €10 and got a little ring, and she very proudly wore it.
Very
in
good.
Danny's mind. And he is a little, how would we put it, romantically preoccupied, as all
I don't
healthy young
blame-
men are.
We all are,
And,
Danny.
so if anyone out there would like to socialize with Danny, yeah, especially in a romantic manner, would please contact us. Isn't that right, Danny?
Good lad, Danny.
I have to keep talking now to James. Is that okay? Good lad. So I was going to go back to something we were talking about a moment ago, James.
About
the culture. Yeah, the culture. So just like all things, I keep zooming out. I go, okay, so what makes Irish culture unique and worth saving? And you would arguably would say things like river dance, Guinness, campfires and singing songs and the natural generosity of the Irish and the kindness. And then you might drift into, the religion, the Catholicism. And all of a sudden you'll get a few people go, well, I'm not so sure about that.
Yes.
Keep the river dance, that's okay, and keep the Guinness. And all of a sudden you start getting subjective opinions about any given culture, about what is worth saving and what isn't. Now, because I've traveled all over the world, and if people were to ask me today, what nationality are you, or where are you from, or who are you, I'd say I'm Irish. Okay,
Yes.
But truthfully, we left Ireland when I was actually born in England. We were back here though before I was a year old in Dundalk. Then spent a couple of years in Tuam. Left Ireland, interestingly, on the 6th of the 6th, 66. Very interesting. Yeah, I know.
No.
That'll be a great one for another time. I can tell you sometime.
That'll do the conspiracy, hence the world of good. So,
But then we spent, then from the age of 7 till 17, I was brought up in England before I went off, joined the military, and then became a truck driver, ski instructor, and all that sort of stuff. Excuse me. But the point I'm trying to make, and then I lived in different countries. I've made an active choice because not only do I have romantic notions about the Irish culture, especially as a boy growing up in Tuam, but then there's parts of Irish culture like the secrecy surrounding the abuse, the abuses in the Catholic Church, the survivors. I did a video just yesterday about the hunger strikers at the Dáil, industrial school survivors, and so on. The incredible levels of thoroughly masked and hidden corruption in all the institutions of the state. Now, this is all part of our culture, James.
yes, but doesn't it continue? Because at the moment, with the Tusla thing and all that, it's very, very obvious to me that there's...
Excuse me. Yeah,
No,
keep
pardon.
going.
Very, very obvious to me with Tusla and that there are children going missing and that there is state silence on it.
Yes.
I can't help but think, you had the problems with the priesthood years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Well, truthfully about it, the priesthood were at the socio-economic top of the society.
Absolutely.
The rest of the society did not question them.
No, they fell into place.
And they fell into place.
Yeah.
Then it moves on from the priesthood to, we'll call the golden circle of Fianna Fáil during the boom times, where they were again at the top of the socio-economic. You didn't question them, you fell into line.
That's right.
Now it's corruption.
Yeah.
So the Irish society en masse, for decades now, have just said, who's on top? Don't cause too much bother for them. And if some whistleblower comes out about them, they will be put back into line middling quick.
Pretty sharpish, yeah.
And this seems to continue on. But I want to, because we'll move to the Patreon. We do a Patreon where we get into real nitty-gritty stuff that would probably get you cancelled off YouTube or that. There's this concept across Western society, across academia, and what I like to think of people who think they know a little bit more than they do.
Yes.
The noble savage. And do we romanticize a period in Ireland where really and truly there wasn't much to romanticize?
No.
It was just people surviving, doing their very best to survive.
Almost like animals, in the sense that intelligent animals, but reduced to that level of existence where you're fully preoccupied with putting a square meal on the table if you're lucky.
Yes.
Or having a shelter over your head, or not being transported off to Australia for some petty infraction.
Yeah.
When that's the full focus. But it's very easy to control people like that, James.
But here's the danger. You go back to Joyce, Yeats, Mark, all these characters, right? We like to think that's the Irish culture.
Yes.
When in actual fact it wasn't. It was a very rare person who was educated, who went around observing people going about their day to day.
Because they had the time and
Because
the
they
money
had the time and the
resources
money
to
and
do
the
it.
resources.
Yeah, that's it. And they had their full belly. Yeah, that's right. So, and in a way, today, interestingly, even though I've never had money per se, I was never wealthy or anything like that, in the financial sense.
Yes.
But in the other sense, I've had all of these opportunities to do exactly that. You
Yes.
know, partly actually because of Danny's special condition.
Yes,
because
yes,
there's a minimum, we get a minimum payment comes in.
Yes,
Which at least, like you said, makes sure that there's food in the fridge and there's
Yes.
heat in the house and all the rest of it. So we've got the bare minimum covered.
Yes.
And most of what I do doesn't cost a lot, other than maybe a tank of petrol.
Yes. Yes.
Most of what I'm doing lately since my wife passed has been, it had to be changed because of my responsibilities and everything. But again, if people ask me to come to a meeting, I say to them, just cover my travel expenses and I'll come. There's no cost or anything. And then usually the people will buy a couple of books or they'll throw a few pennies, but it's not asked for.
Yeah.
And it's not required. As a matter of fact, I was asked once to go up to the north.
Yes.
And do a talk, and some other, let's just say, prominent pro-justice figure had also been approached, and he required a fee,
Yes.
a few hundred or whatever it was, and so on and so forth. And when they came to me and they asked this, and I said, and I just said to them, no, and I don't want to sound too much like a goody-goody,
Yeah.
but it actually is part of the notion of vocation versus being a pro-justice activist as a business. Well,
Yes.
and of course, some people are like, oh, he's just doing this to sell books. No, don't be ridiculous. I didn't get thrown in jail twice, I didn't, and all the rest. Didn't have years and years of all of this hassle in order to write books. It just so happens that I'm in a position to do so. I have the knowledge, I have the evidence, and this is my way of trying to elevate. Do you remember we said earlier about being a carpenter?
Yeah.
You don't use your superior skills to keep everyone else in the dark.
Yes.
You use them to lift them up to the same level. And hopefully, in turn, they're doing the same with you
Yes.
in whatever area of expertise they have, even if it is only having a good heart. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, I think a major thing going forward is if we got rid of this element of protectionism, and like I'm a huge advocate for open source. I love it.
Yes.
I love
Yes,
the
yes,
fact
yes.
of people just going, here's a chicken coop, this is how you make it.
Yeah.
And
Perfect.
people kind of look at it and go, did he just show us?
Yeah.
Like, this is why I like YouTube.
Yeah.
Anything you want to do, type it into YouTube and you will find some good soul someplace who's gone, this is how
gone
you
to the
do
bother
it.
of There's this little reward that we have to be aware of. Some people just like seeing their faces on camera and stuff like that. And even I would admit that although I didn't consciously choose to be, for example, the spokesperson for Integrity Ireland,
Yes.
I was the administrator. I set it up, if you like, the ideas behind it, and as we shaped and formed it, everything was, like I said before, it was about being efficient, cost-effective, getting to the destination the quickest way possible without wasting time. We had to turn some people away, for example, who couldn't, for one reason or another, fill out an application form that required them to explain what their story was in a concise format.
Yes.
And I said to them, well, look, if you can't do it, get one of your grandchildren to do it, or your wife or husband or whatever it might be. But I'm sorry, we've learned that just listening to people vent on the phone for hour after hour, when literally that's all they want to do. They just want someone to listen to their story.
Yes.
And I say, yeah, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to change the system somehow.
Well-
Change it or disempower it or whatever we have to do. But there's something fundamentally wrong here. And it does come back to this, like I said, the original notion of this notion of a benign deity who cannot engage in evil, and this other entity
Which attacks them constantly.
which is evil personified.
Well, we're going to get in the second hour to more of what Integrity Ireland does.
Sure.
And I'm going to hit you with my thought process on the Irish judicial system, because I don't think it's as Irish as people like to talk about.
Yes.
Would you just briefly, the analogy, you used a football analogy.
Yeah. Well, as an ex-soccer referee.
Yeah.
What I've been explaining to people, and this was in context of the Misha era event that happened a couple of days ago, where I met some of my, let's call them pro-justice colleagues, who I've been in various different groups, you see.
Yes.
And before I just say the analogy, I'll give you another sort of analogy, which I used the other day to explain to a friend. It's like being the scout on a wagon train crossing over to the west, yeah? You're not the manager of the wagon train, you know, and all of the people in the wagon train they stay there. You're the scout. You go out ahead and you explore a couple of valleys to discover which is the safest one, which one doesn't have Indians in it, right? But a big part of that job, it's not just being a scout. It's actually convincing the people when you come back.
The route
to take. And this has possibly been my greatest sense of frustration over the last 10 or 15 years, is that I was going up, and in some cases I was the very first person to do some of these things. Like, for example, lodge common informer applications against guards, prosecute them in my own name, you know.
Yeah.
It's in the newspapers online if you want to go look for it. Then eventually I went after judges, you know, barristers, the DPP's office, and so on. And that's when you force them to expose their own mendacities and all of their own criminality, because there's no way they're going to let a character like Manning prosecute a judge in front of the whole bloody world. Put him in jail. But how? We can't do it legal. We'll do it illegally then.
Yes.
Just get him in there and shut him down, and then go after his kids and whatever's necessary, you know, and his income and, you know. But to come back to the point, James, remind me. I'm
the
drifting.
analogy on the
Oh,
football
yes.
game, and then everyone
So
can
the scout.
follow it.
So anyway, so the big part of the job of the scout is also to convince, and this is the role that I know stuff. I know stuff. Now, just saying to somebody, I know what's up that valley, that can be perceived as arrogant, condescending, you know, what's the word, patronizing and all the rest of it. So there's a skill set first of all, whether it's generated or whether it's just part of your DNA, I don't know, but the courage required, such as yourself as well, to take certain actions, knowing that there will be consequences or could be consequences,
Yes.
you know. Like do you remember I arrested some guards outside my house? They trespassed on the property. My heart was in my mouth, especially when 5 unmarked Garda cars and a detective car, one unmarked Garda car and 5 marked cars turned up the Boreen, like the little roads coming in here.
Yes.
You know, lights going and everything. And I thought, oh God, I've gone too far. But anyway, that's maybe an interesting story, but we definitely would get cancelled if we put it on this first one. So there's a certain amount of confidence and courage if you're going to be a scout. Now, you don't sometimes know you're being a scout. You just go, well, it's obvious to me this is the right thing to do. And then you go, well, everybody else had better sense than to try and swim across a river on their horse type of thing. You know, you say, yeah, well, we've got to get across somewhere. And if I can get across it on my horse, then I can tell the wagons it's shallow enough to cross here type of thing, you know. But that skill set, first of all, the courage and the independence, and not just self-confidence, but confidence in your, what I call your conscience, your intuition, to do something that may not have been done before. Then to put in the hard work, the academic studies and everything, to understand what it is you're getting involved in. And then thirdly, to try and convince others. And like I said, this has been the biggest source of my frustration. That's why I very happily accept interviews like this, James, you know, because it's another opportunity to just scatter the seeds out into the universe, let them fall where they may, you know, and no doubt other people better informed and more capable than me, as I heard actually in Misa Era the other day, there were some things that I was talking about a few years ago that are being picked up on now by even some of the key speakers. I'm not saying they heard it from me, but they heard it from somewhere.
Yes.
And as far as I know, I may have been one of the first people to talk about it. So it's good to see that happen, because ultimately, as we said earlier about the analogy about carpentry, even if I were to make a statement like, well, I know stuff and I'm a teacher, it's not to dominate people. It's to empower them.
Well, tell everyone there where they can follow you on social media and website links and stuff like that. And we'll also add them to the description. So
sure. And maybe later I can send you one slide. I have one slide that I usually put up at the end of my weekly videos.
Yes.
And it has most of the places where we're active.
Brilliant.
But we have, for example, the Integrity Ireland website, which is an obvious place to go if you're involved in turmoil and drama with the system, you know, the legal system. that leads also into another one. We probably shouldn't talk about it today because it's, the People's Tribunal of Ireland, which is an operation set up for communities to use to count as a countermeasure against corrupt decisions and actions in the courts. In other words, it's a system fully lawful, set up according to all of the principles of law, whereby you can produce paper results. You don't have enforcement, unfortunately, but paper results that correspond with the existing law of the land that can then, before you go into court, you walk in, you say, actually, the decision's already been made, Judge. You can all go home for today. You can go off and play golf. Here's the decision. All you have to do is endorse it. And in the decision are all the arguments and the laws, quoted laws, which is very short. It's only 4 pages or less. So we're all talking about like bypassing this corrupt system with all of its convolutions and expenses and lies and deceptions and red herrings and obfuscations. Bypass it, go in and say, well, we've had a hearing of the people and they've the independent adjudicators, who are unknown to anyone except for me as the administrator. They don't even know each other, but they're qualified people that have volunteered to adjudicate. People of sound mind, as they say, right thinking people, these legal concepts. There's no they can't object to this, because even in our Irish Constitution, the judges of the Central Criminal Court, which is according to international law, an unlawful court, they don't even have to be judges to preside over it. They could appoint you or me in there. It's in the Constitution, I think Article 83 or something. Anyway, it's in there. 58.3, I think.
When does the weekly talk? What day does it occur?
Well, I try my best to do it at 7 o'clock on a Sunday, because it's all the S's, and I call it the S.O.S., Stephen on Sunday, or Sense on Sunday. But it's also the title of our first book, which was Save Our State, S.O.S. Guide, the Integrity Ireland Guide. We did that in 2015. It's a big lump of a book where if they still don't comply with the law when you're in the court, you can fling it at the judge, and it's probably going to do quite a bit of damage. Good substantial book, But sorry, I feel I'm rambling a little bit here.
Oh, it's perfect. So if everyone heads to Integrity
Ireland, the different websites, yeah. And again, I don't know how this works here, James. Maybe I can give you one of these slides, because in different formats. So Facebook is one of the best places to get all the videos, although they did pull a couple. But I did then go to the offices in Dublin a few years back and sat down very politely with them. And I think they got a sense of, let's let this slide. We'll just, this guy's willing to come and challenge us if we do something that's not right. So they were friendly, they were cordial. YouTube, of course, but then again, they've got the censorship. I have backed up everything on Rumble, not everything, but because Rumble, as with Russell Brand, they won't kowtow to the thing. Yeah. I've also I've done TikTok little clippy videos that are generated automatically. Most of them are, a lot of them aren't perfect. Yes. They cut off the wrong times. But the ones that seem to be worth putting up there, I put up a few of them. Some are only 20 seconds, 25 seconds, 30 seconds long. A couple of them have had 40, 50,000 views. Good. Just throw aside commentary about, are we importing, military-aged young men who are incapable of integrating and have a violent, Well, on that note, we'll head to Patreon, because I do want to bring that up. So I do. Okay. And everyone who helps us on Patreon and Spotify, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure having. And we'll do the singing on the next one, if that's all right, Danny.
I say something. So.
He wants to say one last thing. Is that all right, James? Okay. Thanks, lads.
Okay.
Come closer, Danny.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Some happened in my school, and my dad called my school, and some problem in my school, and some people using the TikTok wasn't good, and I don't trust TikTok, so. Well, thank you.
You're dead right, Danny. Good lad.
This he gets triggered off. You see,
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, James. Thank you.